Shalom, friends. I'd like to share a few thoughts about the Korban Pesach, the Pesach sacrifice that was first offered by our spiritual ancestors while they were still in Mitzrayim, in ancient Egypt. Mitzrayim, of course, is also constriction or narrowness, that place of slavery that we often find ourselves. The Hasidic masters say that the liberation of Pesach is a liberation of da'at, of awareness or consciousness. That is the opportunity that we have every year to be a little bit more aware, to liberate our consciousness to a higher level, from katnut, smallness, to gadlut, greatness. So what's this got to do with the sacrifice that was offered? Well, the Korban Pesach, incredibly, was a goat or a sheep, which was the god of the society which was oppressing the Israelites. So the Egyptians worshipped these animals, and they had been battered by plagues for almost a year, according to the commentaries, and their power over the Israelites had been greatly weakened. But still, the Israelites were living in Mitzrayim. They were still living in that place. They still had no fully independent means of ensuring their own survival. They were still subject, in a very important way, dependent on their Egyptian hosts. And yet, on the 10th day of Nisan, they were told to take the god of their host society, their brutal oppressors who had enslaved them and brutalized them and tortured them and murdered them for centuries, to take the gods of that society and tie it up outside their houses. So the Israelites took the animals, tied them up outside their houses, and waited for 4 days. And then after 4 days, that animal was slaughtered as a sacrifice. And then very dramatically, its blood is smeared on the doorpost. And that blood becomes a birth canal through which the Israelites leave slavery and oppression and go out into the unknown of the Midbar, the wilderness, the desert, freedom. Now, what is so fascinating about the Korban Pesach, there's a few things. One is that this is a god to the Egyptians, an idolatrous god, not really God, right? The sheep or the goat did not really create the universe. They were falsely worshipped. But we don't reject it. We don't send it over the cliff to Azazel, as we do with the scapegoat on Yom Kippur. We don't burn it even as an offering to God. No, it's killed. And the Israelites eat it, meaning they internalize it. So the model here is not one of rejecting, but actually of integrating. And it reminds me of something from Purim. What happens to the house of Haman? Haman is the arch-villain who tries to kill all of the Jews in the Purim story, the Megillah of Esther. Well, the house of Haman is given to Esther. She, in turn, gives it to Mordecai because she's queen. She's doing okay. She doesn't need the house. But the house is not just a physical house, right? It's all of his belongings and all of his power and his ability to affect change in the world. All of that energy is given over to Mordecai. And indeed, our sages tell us that the descendants of Haman, that wicked person who tried to annihilate the entire Jewish people, his descendants, our sages say, become great Torah scholars. So they become partners in repairing the world through our spiritual path. They become integrated into our path. In the same way, the idolatrous god of the Egyptians and their religion, like all societies, their idolatrous religion is used to justify their injustice, their brutality, their enslavement of others. But that God, we don't, as I say, just send it off a cliff or burn it up. We eat it. We bring its calories, its energy, its flesh, its goodness, its nourishment into us. And we use that to power us going out through that birth canal. Again, a birth canal, which is the doorway smeared with the blood of the animal very dramatically into freedom and into the unknown. Something else about the Korban. Fascinatingly, the Torah says that the sacrifice has to be roasted when it's in what we would call the fetal position. So with its head on its knees and with its knees on its feet. So curled up in a fetal position, which suggests one of the main themes of the holiday, which is that of the inner child, that of the fact that at Seder night there's a lot of talk about children, not only actual children, but the children within us all. The fact that just before Pesach, the reading we read from the prophets, from the end of the book of Malachi, is about Eliyahu the prophet, who of course visits us at the Seder as well, according to the Haggadah. And what does it say? It says that Eliyahu, is going to come before the great redemption of the world, the ultimate redemption of universal peace and justice. And what's he going to do? How do you prepare the world for universal peace and justice? It says in the prophet, he will return the hearts of parents and children to one another. In other words, he will repair the rift between generations. He will make it possible for those of different generations to communicate in a constructive way with each other. Well, isn't that what we're there to do at the Seder? Isn't that what the Seder is for? The whole Seder is built on the verse in the Torah which says, and you will tell it to your children. By the way, that's said to us in the Torah while we are still in Mitzrayim. We're told, while we are still there, before we have left, you are going to tell your kids about this. There's going to be an intergenerational conversation about what is happening right now. In fact, the first Seder is when we're eating the Pesach sacrifice in our houses in Mitzrayim. It's not a practice that starts later. Of course, we know different texts were added later and lots of customs were added later. But the core practice, according to the Torah, something happens in Egypt itself that we clearly identify as a Seder. They sit around eating the sacrifice, and the Mo'anaim, the Shenob Rebbe, early Hasidic master, says very beautifully, it was because they had emunah, faith or belief, and we'll come back to that word in a second, because they had that quality in their ability to leave, that they could leave. So the Kedushas Levi, another great early Hasidic master, Rabbi Levi Yitzchak Berdichev, he says that the way that the animal is folded up in the fetal position also symbolizes emunah, something about being in that position. He says specifically in Kabbalah, the legs which support us relate to the quality of emunah, and the animal is curled up in such a way that it's on its legs, even its head is resting on its legs. So we, in a very important way, are supported by this quality. And the mystics say that in Mitzrayim, we didn't have much else except emunah. We hadn't done many mitzvot yet. We didn't have much credit. The Exodus is really a manifestation of the Infinite One's chesed, loving kindness or loving oneness for us. It was a gift which we hadn't yet done so much to deserve. But one thing we did have to do in order to be able to leave was we had to believe it was possible. Emunah. Emunah doesn't just mean faith or belief. That's the surface level meaning of the word. But it also means something, according to our mystics, that we choose to believe, something that we choose to embed in our consciousness, to visualize, to make real for ourselves. And indeed, the Sfat Emet, another great Hasidic master, says that if we want to leave our personal Mitzrayim, our personal narrow place of constriction and oppression, then he says what we need to do is connect with emunah, with creative imagination, with visualization, with choosing to believe in the Exodus. We have to believe it's possible for a group of slaves to leave an oppressive host nation. We have to believe that's possible to experience an aspect of it ourselves. So to this end, on the AGS website, there are a few visualizations of the whole journey of the Israelites that they went on during the time they were in Mitzrayim and through the Exodus. The goal is for us to really try and experience in our own way, and everyone's going to experience it differently depending on where you are, what aspect of emunah you are ready to work on and add to wherever you're at. The experience of leaving whatever your personal mitzvah is. And the Mo'anaim, again, the Shnoda Rebbe says, there's the individual exodus and then there's the collective exodus. The Baal Shem Tov says the individual one has to come first. We have to work on leaving our personal place of constriction and oppression so that together, collectively, we can all move to a better place as a people and as a world. May it be so. Our sages say that in Nisan we were redeemed, and in Nisan we will be redeemed. May it be so that we are moving by doing our inner work of connecting with the possibility of moving from katnut to gadlut, from smallness of awareness to greatness of awareness, by increasing our da'at, our consciousness. May it be that we are contributing to the liberation and the redemption of the entire world. Chag Sameach.